The barnyard is the place to be, full of story fun for you and me. Bob and his buddies here to share with you lots of adventures to tell about, it's true. Farmer Bob loves reading stories, yes sirree, and he loves reading stories to all who please. So join him and his buddies for so grand a time. Once you see us, you'll tune in all the time. Come see, meet me, much fun. Now it's done, read us a book. Come, take a look. The barnyard is the place.
Good morning, boys and girls. Isn't it a wonderful day? Well, buddies, are you ready for today's? Oh, those lazy animals aren't even up yet. Patrick, Chelsea, Cowmella, come on, get up.
Oh, Farmer Bob, what's all the noise about?
Don't you know
No, what?
that it's springtime?
What's so special about springtime?
What's so special? Spring is the season when everything is in bloom. The weather gets warmer, the grass gets greener, the flowers start to grow, and all the baby animals are born.
No, really, Farmer Bob?
Yeah.
That's exciting.
I had no idea that spring was so neat.
Speaking of spring, today's story is about a dog who's hatched out of an egg.
Hey, I hatched out of an egg once.
What does hatching have to do with spring, Farmer Bob?
Well, you see, Cowmella, in springtime, baby animals are born, and some animals are hatched from eggs, like me. But, Farmer Bob, I thought only birds were hatched from eggs, not dogs.
Well, in reality, dogs really aren't hatched out of an egg.
But I thought you said that the dog was hatched.
I did. Well, just listen to the story and you'll find out. Today's story is How Fletcher Was Hatched by Wendy and Harry Devlin.
So Fletcher is the dog, right?
Yes, Fletcher is the dog. Alexandria sat in the sunlight watching a chick hatch from an egg. Peep, and it was out of its shell. Fletcher, she called to her dog, look at this dear chick. It's so tiny, it's so yellow, it's so fluffy. It's so stupid, growled Fletcher to himself. He gave Alexandria a hopeless look and walked to his water dish. It was empty. Another thing, he hadn't had his ears scratched in days. No one wants a first-rate hound dog around here, he thought to himself. She's forgotten me. Fletcher raised his head and howled miserably. Quiet, Noisy. The chicks are sleeping. Alexandria turned her back on Fletcher. With a wounded look, Fletcher shuffled mournfully away toward the park at the edge of town. At the far end of the park was a pond where Fletcher's faithful friends, Beaver and Otter, lived. Otter was splashing Beaver at the water's edge when Fletcher shuffled up. The animals weren't long in noticing Fletcher's sadness. Fletcher saw to that with a few deep moans and some very loud sniffles. Alarmed, they gathered close to hear his tale. She's forgotten me, said Fletcher. She loves chickens. Cute, fluffy, peeping, stupid chickens.
Hey, that's not nice.
I'm sure he didn't mean it. Beaver and Otter, who were wild, free animals, didn't really understand Fletcher's deep attachment to his mistress. But they understood that Fletcher was terribly unhappy. I'm terribly unhappy, said Fletcher. Maybe if you were fluffy and yellow, said Otter doubtfully. Could you peep a little, asked Beaver. If you could only hatch once in a while, said Otter. That's it, cried Beaver, slapping his tail. We'll have you hatch. It will be a new beginning. Me? Hatch? Yelped Fletcher. But Beaver and Otter paid little attention to Fletcher. They were soon in a warm discussion of how to make an egg large enough to hold a hound dog. With some misgivings, Fletcher promised to do his part and act like a chicken. They built the egg around Fletcher. All day they worked in the sun with reeds, clay, and river grasses. Otter sometimes stopped to tickle Fletcher's nose with the corn flour, but Beaver, who was a master builder, worked steadily, plastering pink clay evenly over a reed network. With his friends working so tirelessly, Fletcher couldn't complain, even when wet lumps of clay dropped on his head.
Poor Fletcher. He doesn't look very happy, does he?
Don't worry, Patrick. I'm sure it will all work out.
At last it was finished. Beaver had smoothed the clay over the surface with such artistry that there could be little doubt that this great pink pearly object was an egg that would have been a joy to any mother bird's heart. He speckled it brown in honor of Fletcher's own brown spots. 2 small holes were left in the egg so that Fletcher could be fed water and a strawberry or 2. Beaver, Otter, and Fletcher were tired. It had been a long day's work. Shadows grew deeper and lengthened into the blue of night, and when the pumpkin-colored moon appeared on the rim of the pond, Beaver and Otter, nestling close to their great egg, lay deep in sleep. Inside the egg, feeling very homesick, Fletcher wondered if Alexandria was thinking of him. Back in the farmhouse, Alexandria lay awake under her red quilt. Tears fell on her pillow. How could she sleep with Fletcher gone, perhaps never to return? The clock struck 12 before she finally went off to sleep. Well, my buddies, what do you think of the story so far?
It's really good, Farmer Bob. But this hatching business, I don't really understand it at all.
Well, actually, it's not that complicated. You see, it's all like this. Roll 'em.
Living in an egg.
Say, this sure looks familiar to me. I can remember when my little cousin Chico was hatched. Oh, he was so cute.
I'd like to spread my wings, though I'm not sure if chickens can fly. There are so many things I'll never know I can do unless
It may not look very hard to break out of the egg, but believe me, it's a whole heck of a lot of work.
I'm breaking out.
After all that time of being cooped up in that lousy shell, when it's time to come out, they're ready and willing to be free.
I'm breaking out without a doubt. Come what may, today's the day. I'm breaking out.
Aw, there he is. I wonder if he's someone I know.
I've been waiting for this moment since the moment I was laid. I don't know what
You know,
the world
us chickens are a very close-knit group.
really swell. So make some room, 'cause today's the day. I'm breaking out of my shell.
You can see him here now with all his little brothers and sisters. They're so happy together.
I'm breaking out. I'll make lots of friends with future roosters and hens. There's no time to sit and pout. I'm breaking out without a doubt. Come what may, today's the day. I'm breaking out.
Oh, I see. That's really neat.
Farmer Bob, may we please finish the story now? I want to hear how it happens.
Surely, Patrick, I was hoping you'd ask me that. At last it was morning. At the pond, the white surface of the water was broken by jumping frogs and leaping minnows. Otter and Beaver awoke and ambled down to the water's edge for a quick dip and breakfast. They didn't forget a few strawberries for Fletcher, who was discovering that the inside of an egg is a most unsatisfactory place to yawn and stretch. "Let's go," commanded Beaver. Now the animals started the last part of their plan. Very carefully, they pushed, shoved, and rolled the egg until they reached a large clump of grass by the path that led to Alexandria's school. Inside the egg, Fletcher felt a bit bruised and very confused. The town began to wake up slowly, and the sounds of traffic drove Beaver and Otter back to the pond and the tall grasses. They shouted goodbye. "Good luck, Fletch, and remember, no barking, just peeping." "Peep," growled Fletcher, and then lay quiet. It was the custodian on the way to open the school who first discovered the amazing egg. He shouted to some nearby children, It's an egg, the biggest one in the world. Call the science teacher. Soon a crowd of children gathered about. Their eyes were filled with wonder. Where is its mother? Asked little Tommy. Its mother would be as large as a house, said round-eyed Gabby, shaking her blonde hair. Bigger, said Robert. The science teacher scurried up to the crowd with his friend, Professor Snitcher from the university. The crowd became larger, and the members of the school band, on their way for an early practice, gathered close. The science teacher stood up on the park bench and shouted, "Don't touch it! It looks like a flat-billed prehistoric scratch-a-farch, a priceless find." A respectful hush fell on the crowd. Or perhaps it is the web-foot, pickle-faced dinoflyer, cried the professor from the university.
That's so funny. Nobody knows that it's Fletcher.
Fletcher huddled inside the egg, quivering with excitement as he waited for Alexandria. Suddenly he heard her name. The children were telling her about the egg. Fletcher now began to get ready for the big moment, but Alexandria was making funny noises. Alexandria was crying. She told them all that she didn't want to see a stupid old egg. She was looking for lost Fletcher. In fact, the only thing in the world that she wanted was Fletcher.
I knew she loved Fletcher.
Then and there, Fletcher knew it was time to hatch. He pushed and stretched, and with a rising howl, he fairly exploded out of the egg. The crowd screamed and moved back. Fletcher shook himself, and the mud flew. Feeling that something was expected of him, he turned to Alexandria. "Peep," he croaked. Laughing and crying, Alexandria hugged him. The two men of science looked at their shoes and felt a little foolish. "Strike up the band," said the principal, hoping that everyone had forgotten about his guest, that the mother of the egg was a giant hen from Mars. The band played Hurrah for the Red, White, and Blue. The principal, feeling called upon to bring the occasion to a close, faced the audience. He wiped his face with his handkerchief. "Only in America," he announced with great feeling, "could a hound dog hatch." This seemed to please everyone. With much clapping and whistling, the crowd began to fall away. That's good. Alexandria skipped along with Fletcher. Fletcher panted happily. Sometimes Alexandria had to stop to hug her dog. And Fletcher thought to himself, "You don't have to hatch to be loved. You don't have to be yellow and peep. You can be a great hound dog with brown spots and be the most important creature in a little girl's life." He gave himself a good shake, and the last of the dried mud on his back went flying. The end. Well, I enjoyed the story. What do you guys think about it?
Oh, it was great! That was wonderful! Wow!
So who's got today's letter?
I do, Farmer Bob. Here you go.
Thank you. Today's letter is actually two questions from the kindergarten class here at the high school. The first question comes from Andrea B. How do kangaroos get born? Chelsea, why don't you answer that question for Andrea?
Okay, Farmer Bob. Well, Andrea, baby kangaroos are born just like any other mammal. But when they're born, their mommies have special pouches in which the baby kangaroos can stay in until they're big enough to play out all on their own.
Okay, thank you. The next question comes from Alex Y. Where do the bunnies stay when it is winter? Cowmella, why don't you answer that one for Alex?
Okay, Farmer Bob. Well, Alex, it is very cold in the winter, isn't it? Now, little baby bunnies like to stay with their families when it is cold outside. So they usually have a home in the ground or in a little cave on the side of a hill. Now, that's where they stay in the winter until it is nice in springtime. Start hopping around.
Thank you, Cowmella. Well, Andrew and Alex, we hope we answered your questions all right, and thanks for your questions. That's all we have for this month. We'll hope to see you next month.